So I'd just like to begin by acknowledging the traditional territory of the Lheidli Tene people and thank them for allowing us to gather here at this conference. This project began as an effort to inventory and analyze the many post-secondary and adult education programs and initiatives that have been offered to Inuit in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut beginning in the 1960s. As the project evolved, I was brought on to develop a historical examination of the evolving ideas and debates surrounding the establishment of a university in the Canadian Territorial North. As an interdisciplinary team, our work draws from the fields of public policy, political economy, history, and Canadian studies. When discussing post-secondary education in the North, a discussion of the political economic context is particularly instructive. For Sheena, one of my research colleagues, her archival research in Yellowknife, Iqaluit, and Ottawa, as well as 30 semi-structured interviews with current and former public leaders, administrators, educators, and students, has revealed the ways that the history of adult and post-secondary education in Inuit territories is intertwined with federal and provincial development goals. In the case of a northern university, the earliest strategies for its creation were driven by southern research interests and nationalist thinking that viewed the North as a central component of Canada's political and economic destiny. This presentation is an overview of our findings to date and also provides a summary of our upcoming research plans. Although Sheena and I have worked on different aspects of this project, our findings overlap in many ways. Sheena's research has shown that in the absence of a university in the North, there exists a strong tradition in Nunavut's Arctic College to establish institutional partnerships with southern universities. These partnerships offer select degree programs to the people of the North. Hundreds of adult education and post-secondary courses and programs have been offered across the North since the 1960s, most typically in reaction or response to economic pressures and opportunities that have arisen. And over time, these programs have been shaped and reshaped by Inuit parents and students' choices and the initiatives of a few non-governmental organizations devoted to democratic development. These programs can be divided into three main categories: academic, vocational technical, and cultural linguistic. The longest standing program of an academic nature is the Northern Teacher Education Program, or NTEP, which was set up at McGill University during the 1960s. It was during this time that education programs offered to adults were linked closely with community development. Indeed, community engagement through education coincides with Inuit self-determination. For example, during the 1970s, Indigenous organizations like ITC, or now ITK, viewed education as a policy area that was essential for self-determination. Yet, adult education and post-secondary programs were also part of an attempt by government to integrate Northern Indigenous peoples into the Canadian political and economic landscape. For example, Frontier College and the government of the Northwest Territories offered home management, cooperative management, and vocational programming with increasing frequency during the 1970s. Quickly, adult and post-secondary education became focused on skills development and improving the employability of Indigenous peoples in the wage economy. For example, heavy equipment operation training was a very common course offered in the North during this time. Many of these education programs were offered through Arctic College, community learning centers, or directly by government departments who had a mandate to train the northern labor force. Other program providers include non-profit organizations like Nunavut Sivanuksavut and the Cultural School at Clyde River. Industry associations were also responsible for training programs, particularly in the oil and gas industry. In 1982, the recommendations of the Special Committee on Education led to the creation of the college campus system in the Northwest Territories. This foundational report greatly increased the number and range of programs offered. However, the report of the committee, titled Learning, Tradition and Change in the Northwest Territories, recommended against creating a university that would simply model the universities of the South. During the 1990s, preparation for the division of the territory into Nunavut and the Northwest Territories saw a surge of business and administration programs offered by government and the colleges in the eastern and western Northwest Territories. With the creation of Nunavut, there was a possibility for renewed vision for an education system in the Eastern Arctic. And in more recent years, innovative programs like the Masters of Education offered through the University of PEI are seeing great success, reflecting the evolving education vision set by Indigenous groups. The point here is that post-secondary and adult education programs offered in the North have tended to mirror the political and economic events and priorities of their time, often responding directly to short-term labor force needs. However, there have always been active discussions in both territories regarding the development of university and adult education programs that express Indigenous approaches to knowledge, teaching, and learning. These discussions are also reflected in attempts to create a Northern University. The idea of establishing a public university in the territorial North has lingered in public discourse in Canada for decades, and Canada remains the only circumpolar nation without a university in the region. With regards to the history of Northern post-secondary education, Aaron Sinkpill and Amanda Graham have written extensively, although I would say not exhaustively, on the subject as it pertains to the Yukon. Graham's thesis on the University of Canada North is an important look into one of the more prominent iterations of a Northern University. Nevertheless, Graham's work is a solitary one. Given the limited amount of scholarship pertaining to higher education in the Northwest Territories and Nunavut, my intention in compiling my research was to generate a narrative that can contribute to Northern historiography, with the hope that further scholarship may be generated from it. I divided my research findings into two sections that I thought reflected some of the major influences in the Northern higher education debates. Thus, the journal article that I recently submitted for peer review contains one section exploring the early expansion and influence of both Southern universities and the federal government in the North, and a second that looks at the Northern struggle for a higher education system by and for Northerners. That document is called Tracing the Idea of a Northern University, and this paper is sort of tracing the tracing. So as with adult education and university programs offered through the college system, competing visions for a Northern University are directly linked with competing visions for the future of the Canadian North. Beginning in the 1940s, the federal government became increasingly interested in both post-secondary education and the nation-building potential of the North. In 1951, the Massey Royal Commission recommended increased federal expenditures in the area of university education, and with the re-election of the Diefenbaker government in 1958, nation building was articulated through the Prime Minister's Northern Vision. You can see Dief the Chief here in the middle of this picture. As such, the 1960s became a golden age for federal departments responsible for Northern affairs. Their bureaucratic ascent was largely driven by the pursuit of economic growth through the extraction of staple resources. Moreover, increased university funding and the drive to develop the resource wealth of the North meant that an educated labor force and scientific research were foundational. This is perhaps best articulated in the 1962 Glasgow Royal Commission, we really like Royal Commissions in Canada, which argued for much greater investment and coordination within the areas of Northern affairs and scientific research. And again, this comes up in the Science Council, which was a arm's-length federal initiative, the Science Council of Canada. They commented on a Northern University several times, one of which was their document, A Northern Resource Center, a First Step Towards a University of the North. An analysis of this drive to build the nation through research and resources reveals that the earliest conceptions of a Northern University were set on implementing a model that would facilitate research projects originating from the federal government and Southern universities. As we know today, often universities go where the funding is, and that's a very old idea. The funding at this time was in the North. In 1969, the Adult Vocational Training Center was established in Fort Smith. And this reflects Sheena's findings that reveal the desire of governments to offer programs that would integrate Northerners into the resource economy. University education and research remain the domain of the South. During the 1970s, Southern universities launched a series of explorations into post-secondary education in the North. In 1970, the Association of Universities and Colleges Canada received a report back from its Commission on the University and the Canadian North. And in 1973 and 1975, the AUCC generated two more reports, which you can see here on the screen. Yet this interest was not only the result of increased funding and research opportunities. The incorporation of the University of Canada North in 1971 was a catalyst for Southern universities, the Northwest Territory government, and Indigenous peoples. According to Amanda Graham, retired Major General Richard Romer was inspired to create a Northern University during a trip to Inuvik during which he read Jim Lotz's 1970 book, Northern Realities. And Jim Lotz was a former researcher with the Department of Northern Affairs. In that book, Lotz argued that a northern university should be centered on harnessing the development potential of the North to create, quote, a sense of national purpose. Lotz envisioned a northern university as part of a national project, as did Romer. Graham has documented the life of the UCN, and the details of existence need not be repeated here. But nevertheless, part of the reason for the UCN, part of the reason that the UCN was not successful, was due to the socioeconomic complexities of offering higher education in the North. And the conclusion of the AUCC's 1975 report speaks to this. I'll let you read that as I move on. But this 1975 report recommended that the AUCC work to create, quote, a coordinating agency for all universities and other post-secondary institutions involved in Northern activities. Thus, the first conference of the Association of Canadian Universities for Northern Studies was held in 1978, and the conference concluded with several recommendations to support a Northern university. While I've only scratched the surface here, the point is that the development and direction of post-secondary education in Northern Canada, not unlike adult education and college programming, has both resisted and been influenced by the expansion of post-secondary education in the South, Southern research objectives, and nation-building projects. The devolution of authority from the federal government to the Northwest Territories government in the 1960s, as well as the political organization of Indigenous peoples in the North during the 1970s and 80s, did not halt this Southern research agenda. However, it did force Southern institutions to take a supporting role in the struggle for higher education in the North. During the 1960s, the Saskatchewan-based Society for Indian and Northern Education undertook much advocacy work in the area of Indigenous education. Their journal, The Northian, published by the Saskatchewan Teachers Federation, was a source of discussion for Northern education throughout the 60s and 70s, and it was an important resource for me during my archival research. In 1967, James Hammersmith and Tom Butters took to the pages of the Northian to highlight the importance of the Commission's recommendation, quote, that the territorial government institute a crash program of university education for selected Indians, Métis, and Eskimos, end quote. We can see from this quote from Tom Butters out of the Northian that resistance to the imposition of a Southern higher education model was present from early on. While the Indian Brotherhood of the Northwest Territories opposed Romer's founding of the UCN, Inuit in the Eastern Arctic were having their own conversations about a culturally specific university. In his autobiography, That's My Vision, James Arveluk notes that he talked with Jonah Kelly, Ann Hansen, Marcel Fortier, Mary Cousins, and Abe Oakpick about creating Inuit University. The differences between the Eastern and Western Arctic were also revealed when I looked at the Northwest Territory Legislative Assembly Hansard and read the debates surrounding the aforementioned Special Committee on Education findings. Here, two key points surface that are also relevant for contemporary discussions of the Northern University: college campus location and curriculum. Where to situate campuses and what to teach became a political decision as much as a socio-cultural and geographic one. With this historical overview in mind, it is important to understand community desires for educational programming. Sheena is currently working on 2 articles for publication, one examining and analyzing the institutional and policy legacies of the Special Committee on Education, and another that traces the evolution of adult education programming in the Eastern Arctic, using the community of Igloolik Nunavut as a case study. With regards to upcoming research plans, I will be tracing the Northern University story from 1999 to the present. The quest for staple resources, the need to train a Northern labor force, the founding of the University of Canada North, and the advance of Indigenous self-determination have all brought contrasting perspectives to Northern adult and higher education debates. Whatever structure future programs and a Northern university may take, we must be cautious of projects that view university education in the North as simply an opportunity for nation building or the expansion of Southern knowledge systems. The debates and discussions of the past deserve much greater study and reflection as we look to the future. Thank you very much.